Hi students, how are you? We're beginning a 2-week collaboration with students here at Eastern New Mexico University and students at Anahuac University in Puebla, Mexico. So this should be a fun exercise, and I hope that everyone gets something very meaningful from this collaboration. All right? I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint, and we're going to talk about the topic that we're going to be exploring this week and next, and it's called The Physiology of the Auditory Sensation and Perception. So we're going to be looking at the hearing mechanisms in humans. And then we're going to be using software to look at emotional sounds that people make when they experience certain emotions, okay? And then we're going to tie our findings to place theory, okay? I'm going to talk about place theory in this lecture, but please take good notes as I walk through this lecture and explain the human hearing system. And then we'll start talking about groups and what you're going to be doing for the next 2 weeks, okay? All right, so physiology of auditory sensation and perception. My name is Dr. Gary Bond for students at Anahuac, and I'm again at Eastern New Mexico University here in Portales, New Mexico, which is a small town in the United States. All right, you may or may not remember in terms of human vision that we're taking in physical wavelengths of light, okay, from the outside world. And these are called light waves. And there are structures on the back of our eye called the retina, and these structures are called cones and rods, okay? And those are the sensory receptors that transduce what's coming in from the outside world into our human systems, and they transduce the physical energy into neural impulses. In other words, our neurons then take up the information from the physical world and transform that energy into responses that the brain can understand. Okay? So that's the way, just in a short description, that's the way human vision operates, okay? So we have sensory receptors. They're called cones and rods. The rods are sort of longer structures, and they help us to see in dim light or in very bright light. They also help us see sort of the periphery of our vision. So if you hold your hands out at the sides of your head, you can see how far you can go back before you can't see anymore in terms of the periphery, on the outsides of what you're looking at. All right, so cones help us with that. Rods help us with that. Now, cones are smaller, cone-shaped structures, and those are responsible for allowing us to understand colors, okay? We have red, green, and blue cones, and they translate physical wavelengths of color into our systems. And so we understand, different shades of the colors that we see. All right, well, that's all about vision, okay, just in a small nutshell. Now, when we think about the auditory system, that's our hearing system, It sort of works the same way, and yet it's different, okay? In hearing, we take in sound waves, okay, and process those in an intricate auditory system which has evolved to allow us to hear varying degrees of loudness and pitch, okay, pitch. Pitch is sort of the frequency of sounds, okay? If you play a piano, low sounds have low frequencies, high sounds have high frequencies, right? And there are many in the middle. In terms of loudness, we hear loudness in decibels, and I'll talk about that later, but you know, how loud is the sound wave that's coming into the human system? Okay, sound waves look like this when you think about them theoretically. We have waves, right? They're sort of like this, just like the ocean, right? I'm sure some of you there in Mexico live near the ocean, right? And so you understand how waves work in the ocean. Well, we have a compression part of the wave at the top, and then down at the very bottom we have a rarefaction, okay? So the peaks on the graph of a sound wave correspond to compressions. That's the maximum pressure of the wave. And then the troughs, which go down on a graph of a sound wave, correspond to minimum pressure or rarefactions, okay? The size of the peaks represents the wave's amplitude, all right, and corresponds to how much the particles are vibrating. All right, so amplitude has to do with loudness. The distance between the two compressions or the two peaks represents the wave's wavelength and corresponds to how far the wave travels in one cycle, okay? Now, frequency is not shown on this graph, but that corresponds to the number of cycles per second, and that's measured in something called hertz, or Hz. All right, when we think of our ear system, we know that, you know, what we can see on the outside is the outer ear, okay? And if you think about it, it brings in sounds, okay? It captures sound waves. It's on the outside of our head, right? And so, you know, if we cup our hand around this outer ear, we can probably pick up sound waves in better fashion, right? But we don't always do that unless we have trouble hearing something, okay? But the outer ear is only one of three anatomical sections of the ear. There are three general sections: the outer ear, the middle ear, which is shown here in this diagram, and then the inner ear, okay? We're going to look at each of these structures and functions of each section of the ear next. All right, why do we have this outer ear? It's called the pinna, okay? You can see it. It's on the outside of our heads. The pinna, or the auricle is also what it's called, is the part of the ear we see on the sides of our head, okay? Now, some people, if you look around, some people have ears that kind of flap out like this, right? I've seen those kinds of people. And some people have really small ears that are kind of tight against the head. But, you know, all of these are called the pinna or the auricle. The pinna is designed to collect sound waves. And after those sound waves are collected, they funnel them down into the ear canal toward the ear drum. The ear canal is curved and measures about 1 inch long in adults. All right, inside that canal, we have hairs and glands that produce earwax or cerumen, okay? So we have the outside of the ear called the pinna that collects the sound waves. Then we have this canal that the sound waves go through, okay? And let's see, this earwax, the cerumen, helps lubricate the skin and keeps the ear canal functioning normally. All right, now we're moving from the outer ear now toward the inner ear. We have this canal that is bringing in sound, and at the end of that canal, that's where the middle ear begins. Okay, we have something called the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. That is a thin, skin-lined membrane. All right. So the membrane functions by vibrating in response to percussions from compression waves or sound waves that push air molecules against it. There's an air-filled space called the tympanic or middle ear cavity just inside of this eardrum, this tympanic membrane. Vibrations from the tympanic membrane are transferred across the air-filled cavity to three tiny little bones, okay? Those three tiny little bones are called the stapes, the incus, and the malleus. Those structures transmit sound to the inner ear, even farther in. All right, let's look at the inner ear now. And this is kind of where all of the important functions start to take place. The inner ear has two divisions, okay? One is for hearing, and the second is for balance. As you're walking along and maybe you lose your balance, well, you can pick up your balance again. Equilibrium and orientation functions, okay? The hearing division is comprised of something called the cochlea and the cochlear nerve. Some people call this the cochlea and the cochlear nerve, okay? It depends on how you want to pronounce it. The cochlea is snail-shaped. It looks like a snail. You can pick up a shell on the beach, and sometimes you see these spiral kinds of shells that snails leave. Well, the cochlea is kind of shaped like that. It's snail-shaped. It contains the sensory organ of hearing called the organ of Corti, and the organ of Corti releases chemical messengers when vibrations from the stapes activate something called hair cells. All right, now hair cells are the sensory receptors that transduce physical sound waves into neural impulses. So just like in vision, you remember the visual system? We have cones and rods that pick up the physical information and transduce it into neuron information. Well, here, in hearing, the hair cells are the sensory receptors for sounds, and they transduce that physical energy that's coming in from the outside world into neural energy, okay, neuron energy. All right, here is a slide that shows the cochlea, and you really don't need to know all of this technical information about the cochlea, but you can look at this and read about it. It's a structure divided into three fluid-filled parts. Two are canals for the transmission of pressure, and the third is the sensitive organ of Corti, which detects pressure, impulses, and responds with electrical impulses, which travel along the auditory nerve to the brain. All right, this is another slide that talks in detail about what the organ of Corti is. It's situated on the basilar membrane in one of the three compartments of the cochlea. It contains 4 rows of hair cells. Okay, so those hair cells kind of stick up from the surface of this basilar membrane. Above them is the tectural membrane, which can move in response to pressure variations in the fluid-filled tympanic and vestibular canals. The place along the basilar membrane where maximum excitation of the hair cells occurs determines the perception of pitch, according to something called place theory. All right? So inside this kind of snail-shaped cochlea, there are certain places when, if the hair cells are excited to the maximum, corresponds to the pitch of the sound that you're hearing. Okay, I'll show you that in just a minute. The perception of loudness is also connected with this organ. Okay, tiny relative movements of the layers of the membrane are sufficient to trigger the hair cells. Like other nerve cells, their response to a stimulus is sent a tiny voltage pulse called an action potential down the associated nerve fiber, the axon. These impulses travel to the auditory areas of the brain for processing. All right, now this will give you a better idea about what I've been talking about. You see the snail-shaped structure here. There is a membrane, right, that goes all the way around this, and at each section of this membrane there are hair cells. It says here there are as many as 20,000 hair cells in the cochlea. They are arranged from lowest to highest pitch. All right, there is one region here called the apical region of the cochlea that include hair cells that pick up the very low pitches. Okay, so the apical region picks up very low pitches, and the basal region have hair cells that pick up the high pitches. Okay, all right, so you can think of apical as low and basal as high, okay, when you're thinking about the pitches that we pick up. All right, so low pitches are on the apical. You can see that in this bottom frame that has a kind of piano keys going across it. And then the basal region are the high pitches. Now that corresponds to sort of the colors that you see. The low pitches are kind of on the interior of this spiral. And as the spiral kind of moves to the outside, that's where you're having hair cells that pick up more high pitches. Okay? So again, apical is low, basal is high. So, if we were to measure just a single sound or a single phrase, let's say an emotion, right? Some kind of emotional outburst, like excitement, right? Where would that utterance be placed? Where would that correspond on the places where the hair cells are? Well, excitement to me, probably both in men and women, is sort of a high pitch, I think. We can make that hypothesis. We could think that excitement, right, is a higher kind of a pitch. Okay? So we might think that if we were to measure that sound that I just made of excitement, we'd probably find that hair cells on the basal region would be excited, right? Whereas hair cells in the apical region wouldn't, because that's not really a low sound, when we think of what sounds like excitement, right? Because excitement seems to be a little bit higher pitched. All right. So when we make any utterances and somebody else hears those, there are certain hair cells, groups of hair cells that are excited, right? And they bend and they send neural impulses to the brain, and what corresponds to those hair cells gives us an idea in our heads of what pitch we're hearing, okay? So this is called place theory. Now let's look at this. This is kind of a diagram of mice hair cells, all right? Because we can't just go and dissect a human and look at their hair cells and do things like that. Usually we do experiments with mice, okay? And that's what this is. This is a picture of that. Now notice that the apical region is in this first column, okay? It shows the hair cells that are in the apical region. It looks like these hair cells are thicker and they're probably longer as well, right? If you think about a guitar and you think about the lower strings, they are thicker and they're also probably longer, okay, than strings that are that represent higher pitches. I think not so much a guitar, but even just looking inside a piano, okay? If you look inside a piano, there are several strings. Some of the strings are very thick, right, and long, and some of the strings are very thin and short, okay? The thick and long strings, you might think of those as being hair cells that appear on the apical region, okay? It says low pitches, longer hairs. Now, in this third column, you can see something completely different, right? These are higher pitches, these are shorter hairs, and probably skinnier hairs as well, okay? They're thinner hairs. And so you can visualize that on the basal part of the cochlear membrane, you're going to have those shorter hairs, and they pick up the high frequencies, okay? So in the basal region of your cochlea is probably where you're going to hear excitement, right, being produced in language. So if somebody else is excited, if you're walking down a high school hallway, there are lots of kids and they're all excited, right? And you're going to hear those higher pitched sounds. Those are going to be represented on the basal membrane in your head, okay, in your inner ear. So this is interesting. And then you'll see, the second column represents kind of middle-sized hairs, and they're about mid-sized in terms of, diameter. And so you're picking up mid-range kinds of sounds there, all right? Now this is kind of aside from what I've been talking about, but there's some people who lose their hearing, okay? If we go back to this slide here, if we look at a person who has some hearing loss, usually you'll find the hearing loss along the basal membrane, because as we get older, these very thin, very short hair cells kind of start to deteriorate, okay? And so you're going to see some missing hair cells in that area, okay? So what happens if we are missing some hair cells or they deteriorate? Well, there's a possibility that you can either get a hearing aid. You've seen older people with hearing aids, right? Or even younger people. There is a kind of a newer way of restoring some of the hearing that people lose, and that's called a cochlear implant. Okay, and you can read about this and also watch this video, after I do this talk. but at least we have some way of helping people who cannot hear as well as we do, okay? So this is called a cochlear implant. All right, what you're going to do this week, okay? Place theory assignment for your group. The first thing is I'm going to give Jackie a list of groups from Eastern New Mexico University in my class, okay? And then she's going to give that list to you guys, and you guys will join one of the groups, all right? So your group is going to explore speech production and how it might affect sections of hair cells in the cochlea. Your group will record emotional expressions, one from a man and one from a woman. You'll choose just one and only one of the following emotions to get recorded for both the man and the woman. So, what does anger sound like? Okay? I'm interested in anger. Not at, I don't get angry, but I'm interested in hearing what anger sounds like, okay? From men and from women. Just a really short little snippet of someone who is angry, okay? Happiness. What does happiness sound like? Well, I'll bet that happiness has a higher kind of a pitch, okay, than other kinds of emotions. Surprise also. Is that different from happiness if you're surprised? If someone comes up behind you and says, bah, or something like that, how do you react in terms of the pitch of your voice when you are surprised? All right, so choose only one emotion. You could choose sadness too. I didn't put that on the slide, but sadness is a good one also. All right, record the man and the woman, just a short sound from each in the emotion that you chose in your group on a cell phone, and then save them as two what we call WAV files, .wav files, okay? They're sound files. You'll process the recording in some software that we call Pratt, and I'll talk about where to get that in a minute. It's open source software, it's free, and it provides both pitch and loudness measures, okay? So you can get both of those for each one of the sounds from the man and the woman, okay? You can download Pratt on a laptop or on a PC, okay? And play with it to see how it processes sounds. And you can read about how it works at this link, okay? In a Word document, make a table that shows the pitch and loudness for the man's voice and the pitch and loudness for the woman's voice, okay? And then next week, we'll finish up this group assignment with some more stuff to do, all right? Now, let me open this up. This will give you details about what you're going to do this week. Let me make it bigger. All right, I hope everybody's healthy and doing well. This is what you're supposed to do this week, okay? So I said I will send Jackie the list of groups in my class with their emails, and she's going to distribute that to you and assign you to different groups, okay? So after you get your groups, all your group members' emails, I want you to email each other, okay? In your email, you want to say, I am free on Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Puebla time, okay? And we can meet on Zoom, all right? Or, if you're here in America, you might say, I am free at Thursday night between 4 and 9 o'clock p.m. Portalis time, okay? Now remember, when you're working out your meeting time, remember that the time in Puebla, Mexico, is 1 hour later than the time in Portales, New Mexico, okay? So don't forget the time difference. When you set a time like 7 p.m. on Thursday night, just remember to clarify, is that Puebla time or is that Portales time, 7 o'clock, okay? All right, so after you've clarified that, all your group members have contacted each other, then I want you to meet on Zoom on that day and time, okay? This meeting is very important because during your meeting, not only will you talk about yourselves and get to know each other for about 30 minutes, but after that, you're going to start dividing up the work that's due this week, okay? All right, so, you know, it's always nice when you're first getting to meet somebody from, say, a different culture, a different country, to talk about your lives, talk about, you know, what are your career hopes, you know, what are your dreams and things like that, just so people will get to know you, all right? There are some people who are shy, of course. I used to be really shy before I became a teacher, but I sort of forced myself, right, to be a little more outgoing so that I could connect with the students that I'm teaching, okay? So force yourself to talk about yourself, okay? Even if you're a little bit scared, don't turn off your cameras. Don't turn off your video when you're having the meeting, okay? Keep your videos on so that people can see you. I know some people are anxious, some people are shy, some people worry about what other people think about them, but you know what? Don't worry about that, okay? I don't worry about what people think about me, so why should you? You know, that's sort of anxiety about the world. You know, so don't have anxiety, you know, get together and talk about, you know, your lives and get to know each other really well, okay, for about 30 minutes. Now, in the second half of that meeting, here's what I want you to do. There are 8 things, and then a 9th thing is due at the end of the week, okay? But 8 things I want you to do. First, everybody in the group is going to have to download Pratt free software, okay? And there's the website. There's the link where you can download it. And you can download it either on a Windows-based system or a Mac-based system, okay? There are 2 links there that allow you to do that. So download that on your computers. The next one, the second point is learn how Pratt works. Okay, this is probably the hardest step, all right? So you're probably going to take, 2 or 3 people and have them read about how do I use this software to measure pitch in a speech sound? How do I use this software to measure loudness in a speech sound, okay? So this website link here might help you, but you'll probably have to do some more reading in other places to find out how to process speech sounds in Pratt, okay? So that may take like 2 or 3 group members to do that, okay? That's probably the most important part of this whole week's work. All right, number 3, it says decide which emotion you want as a group to concentrate on. So I gave the examples of what kinds of emotions you could look at, okay? And you could look at sadness. You could look at other emotions if you want to, okay? That's all up to your group, all right? Is love an emotion? What does love sound like? If you wanted to look at that, okay, you could, all right? If anybody's interested in love. Okay, number 4, you'll then find one man and one woman who you could record with a short speech sound, like a word or a short phrase that relates to your emotion that you're studying in your group, okay? So you don't want to get actors. I think I'd just get real people. You could get mom and dad, or you could get brother and sister, or you could get classmates to do this, okay? It's all up to you, you know. But designate maybe one person or 2 people to do that part, okay? Record their speech sound and make sure you're getting the emotion that you're measuring in your group, because if you record some sound that is sort of a different kind of an emotion, that's not good, okay? Because we're not measuring what we want to measure, and so that's called a lack of validity in your study, okay? So make sure you're studying or recording the emotion that you want to capture, okay? All right, number 5, after the other people in the group find out how to use Pratt and how it works, then you're going to run these 2 speech sounds through Pratt. So process the sounds in Pratt, find out what is the pitch and what is the loudness for the man and the woman, okay? And then you're going to write those down. So, all the members of the group should have that information after the sounds have processed. Pitch and loudness, okay? Because you're going to need that for the work that we do next week, all right? Number 7, boy, there's so many points here, right? Number 7, have a group member read about what is hertz and what is decibels, and make a short summary, maybe just a few sentences, about what those 2 terms mean, okay? And make sure that whenever you're looking up information, don't get the information from a place like Wikipedia or something like that, right? Because Wikipedia is a bad source, okay? A middle school kid could have written about what hertz or decibels are, okay? Anybody can go in there and write anything they want to, and you're going to have some bad information sometimes, okay? So go to a reputable website that understands and talks about what hertz and decibels are, okay? All right. Number 8, this is the last one. Go to Google Scholar. You'll type in Scholar in Google and click on that website. Then you're going to find some kind of journal article or book chapter that talks about what is the average pitch for a woman's voice. Excuse me. I'm coughing today. I'm sorry. And what is the average pitch for a man's voice? And take notes, okay? And then write down the source that you got that information from, all right? Now, over the lifespan, as one is young and they get older and older all the way to old age, the voice pitch changes, okay? So if that paper talks about that, you want to write down the average pitch for the person that you're recording, okay? So maybe you're recording mom and she's 45. Well, you want to write down the average pitch for a 45-year-old or in that span of time, right? If you are recording grandma, Lola, then you want to write down what's the average pitch for an older adult woman, okay? So make sure that you know the averages for women and men across different age groups so that you can pinpoint, right, the people who have produced the sounds in your group, okay? So this is all information that you have to do this week, okay? It's a lot, I know, But it makes it easier for next week when you have all this stuff. So your assignment, I want to know that you've done all this stuff this week in a group, okay? Your assignment for this week, you're going to email me at this email address, okay? With all of these things that I have in the list. By this Sunday at 11:59 Portales time, okay? So it'll be 10:59 Puebla time. But one member of the group will email me all this stuff, okay? Make sure you do that so you can get credit for this week's work, all right? I will share with Jackie, who's a professor at Anahuac, who has sent me their assignment on time and if they have completed all the work they're supposed to do. Okay? All right, so there we go. And you guys have a good week. Work hard. Get this done. And do your best and have fun, okay? This is going to be a fun collaboration. And you'll learn a lot in this process, okay? All right, so you guys take care, and I'll have another lecture for you next week, okay, on what to do. Thank you. Bye-bye.